Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. I'm DV LeBron. Today, my very special guest is Dr. Ginger Carlson. Now, can you imagine with today's divide in politics and the way that things are, you know how ugly things are, folks, and even locally, some of these political races throughout the years that I've covered have been really ugly. So, can you imagine using AI to try to get through our differences or just using different approaches? Well, Dr. Carlson has developed a way, she has actually pioneered a way to look at these things in a way that gets through the boundaries. So, Dr. Carlson, thank you so much for coming on my show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So, like I told you offline, I am a guy who tends to live in the realm of kindness. That's where I want to be. And I found that God has blessed me because of my kindness, trying to be kind to folks and humility. But I also know that politics now, unlike when I was up, you can be, on one side of the aisle and you guys be best friends. Now it's very, very polarizing environment, even locally in these, and I'm in smaller town, Texas. I'm south of Dallas. And, even in the smaller communities, you're starting to see that very entrenched differences. So I kind of wanted to have you on to talk about that. But first, let me have you introduce yourself and tell me about your project.
Yeah, thank you. So I grew up actually in a really small rural town in the Western United States and ended up going overseas with my career. I've spent the last 3 decades doing that. And then kind of had a shift a few years ago where some major things happened in my family. That my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and I ended up being back to the United States and really saying, like, what are the priorities? And I had been working in dialogue and organizational change and professional development for a lot of years in the education realm. And I knew I wanted to stay doing that. But I was really taken by how polarized our environment, our world has become, how separated we are. And so I started diving into research around empathy and how we can bridge these divisions in the world. And one particular piece of research kind of popped up to me, and it was around visualizing our thinking and looking at how people come to consensus or solve their problems, make decisions better, even though we're completely on opposite ends of the spectrum. And so we started this project, myself and an old colleague friend of mine. We started the Multilarity Project. And the idea being that we're not just polarized in the world. We like to think that we are, but really there are a multitude of perspectives that exist in the world. So how can we bring people around a table who are very, feel very divided, either, belief systems, ideologically or otherwise, and begin to help build some empathy around these subjects, not to change opinions. It's not our role or mission to change anybody's opinion, but that we would develop some kind of understanding of where the other side is coming from. It's not lost to me that tonight we have a debate, but
Exactly. And I was definitely gonna allude to that. We have an election in probably the most polarizing time in our country's history. There are many reasons for that. I'm sure the media doesn't help. Instead of issues, there'll probably be a lot of ugliness, and everybody will go to their corner and their tribe and rah, rah, rah. And nobody wins, really. Nobody wins. We all lose. But how do you get, you have the new thing, and I say the new thing because I'm 47. I remember back in the day when, just because you had this opinion, you wasn't a Nazi or a phobe of some kind or a nist or whatever hyperbolic name you could come up with.
Right.
How have you developed something to deal with those responses? Because those are normally the first responses when you say something that somebody disagrees with.
Right. And so what we've done is we've developed and it's built on what we call the multilarity thinking process. And we have built a very structured dialogue process to bring people around the table that really sets the space and the stage for people to listen, which is, what we see a major lack of. There's a lot of talking, not so much listening, right? And so we've created this structured dialogue process where people come together and we walk them through a series of questions and explorations and experiences where they're sharing, their what they feel about the subject, but also their experiences about it. And what we find is that through the process, people begin to listen deeply. They begin to wonder more. They begin to ask questions of other people who may be sitting, what you would call across the aisle. And it's a fascinating process to watch people not have a different opinion necessarily than what they came in with, but to soften to, oh, like for instance, we held a public session around reproductive rights. And which was in a lot of ways, it was a little scary to take on as a facilitator,
That's a tough one.
but it was a really incredible process to facilitate because all of the ends of the spectrum around the table went, oh, I understand it in a different way now. And so I can have a conversation that's a little bit more productive. And often we get people, writing back to us or joining a second or third or fourth, because we offer these free public sessions where people can come and be a part of it without being part of a group that we're working with. Because we also do private work with corporations and schools and different systems. But these public sessions, people will come and come back or write back to us and say, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it because I now understand it in a different way. I'm able to go to Thanksgiving dinner and talk to my niece or my uncle or somebody that I was at odds with a different way of being,
Is there something that you require from that? So you come into with this project and is there something that's required from the participant in order for this to work?
Yeah. I mean, the requirement is you're willing to show up, right? And you're willing to participate and be part of an engaged experience where we go, hey, we're talking about this thing today and we need you to bring your whole self to the conversation. That requires both, people actually get pretty vulnerable pretty quickly and share very deeply about what is most important to them. So really the requirements, the willingness to be there and the engagement when you're there.
How do you keep it from descending into chaos?
Yeah. I mean, really people end up kind of respecting the process too. And so we actually thought we would around a couple of different topics, gun control or, like the reproductive rights was one. I thought when we did censorship that we might have some hard times with some of those topics. But what happens is even as diverse as the groups become, they end up respecting the process. We do set the container in a very structured way.
Okay.
And I guess much like a debate where you're given, a certain amount of time to talk, you're asked to respond on a particular topic. But I think what happens very quickly is that people see the humanity in people in the way that we introduce it and set up the container.
Wow. No, I love that. And what I think too is that if you're doing this normally face to face and people are asking questions stuff, I think that probably helps, Doc, because we're what we see now is everything is right here. So you could say anything. Anything could come out of this. You don't have to see that person as a human. There's something on the screen. They're
Right.
not necessarily human. They're not in front of you. You don't get to see that they're a person. And so that disconnect has driven a lot of things. They become a caricature or something completely different than a human being. So putting them in front of each other, I guess it helps. But one thing that I saw from one of your TED Talks was how you showed it up, like you did a visual representation and how they did the conversations and how they ended up being somewhere in that same area. And I'm sorry, I'm not smart enough to kind of but I did get it when I was watching it. So can you kind of talk about how you do that with the AI? How does that break that down?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad you brought it up because you introduced it talking about AI and I hadn't mentioned it yet. So basically, the process is not just a dialogic experience, where we are just talking. We also use AI to track the conversation. One of the things that AI is really good at is identifying patterns. It's one of the things that AI is used for the most, across huge data sets, with medical anomalies, all of the things that, AI is used for. One of the best places is identifying those patterns. And so it is processing what is common about everything that everybody's saying. What is very different was so identifying both the commonalities and the perhaps paradoxes, which there often are, but we also can see that there are more commonalities than not, even across ideological divides. And then also listening in and identifying the emotional outcomes that are coming up. And so then the AI creates symbolic representation, visual representations. It looks artistic, but is the intentional use of symbology
Mhm.
to represent all of those multiple perspectives in the conversation. And what happens is people attach meaning very quickly. They see themselves represented in those pieces. And they also see that that coexists and lives in the same piece with the other perspectives that were shared around the table. And so it's the fascinating experience. And then we also, and I think you might be referring to the talk about rethinking your beliefs, which
Right.
I showed a slide that was the multilarity, which is all of those different perspectives, all those polarities kind of living in one infographic, if you will, showing, and that one was specifically around tribalism, which basically is the root of, everything that we're talking about, how people divide each other, right? And you
Right.
even used the word tribe earlier in the
Mhm.
conversation, right? Our tribe. And then that immediately take, the other, if you're not part of the tribe, then you're the other, right?
Mhm.
But what we find is that then we can represent all of those multarities that exist in that conversation. So then visually you can see, oh, they're both connected. They feel disparate. They're actually interconnected, which is all of our belief systems. So it's a full process, but it's also just a fascinating thing to watch and be a part of.
Yeah, I was completely blown away by it. Like I was like, wow. And I came to my beliefs from a different track for me than the average person who believes what I believe. So I have a bit of empathy for some differing opinions, even though I don't agree with them. I do have some things, but um, some things are like no-nos, complete no-nos. And when you get into those no-nos, and then like you talked about with abortion, reproductive rights, right? Get into something where something is so black and white with the way that it is seen, so black and white.
Mhm.
Where do you find where do you find the multarity is and where do you in that? Where have you found it? Like what words triggered or actually got to that?
That show a black and white divide.
That you use, so you had the black and white and you had the all the bad stuff in there, and then you got to that multario, that good stuff. What brought that? What was the shuttle there on that topic? I'm sorry, I can't
That
explain
one,
it.
tribalism.
Yeah.
Are you asking me like, was there a moment where people went, oh, like,
And what caused that O? Because that is a very polarizing subject. So
mhm.
where did the O happen? What made that O happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. So our process is that we create the space, guide people through the experience of talking about it, and then add in the symbology. Somewhere between having gone through the experience and being then guided to surface assumptions that other people have and that we have, somewhere between that and the processing of the symbology, 100% of the time, people are reporting that they have insight that they hadn't had before, that they see it in a deeper way than they had before, and 100% so far report, I now empathize with this other perspective, even if they came in thinking it's totally wrong, it's totally bad. But then people are able to just talk about it in a more insightful way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the lack of conversation, lack of people being able to talk to each other is why I thoroughly respect and love what you're doing, because it's something that needs to happen, regardless of where you stand politically and where people stand politically, etc. That we need to start talking to each other, because societies that stop talking to each other start shooting at each other. I've been around the planet and I've seen that, and I'd never want to see that again. And I definitely don't want to see it down here in Texas or in Kansas or in New York. I don't want to see it here. So that's kind of why I seek peace in it. Now, where have you conducted have you done these projects all around the world?
Yeah, we actually intentionally do the public sessions by Zoom so that we can get people from all over, from any time zone. And we have done them right now we're only doing them at noon Pacific time, but because we are able to get, people from Europe and South America at that time, we've had people call in from Australia and New Zealand and, different countries in Africa and across the US. But we've done them, we do them. If someone said, "Hey, can you do one at 6 a.m," we do, we actually have groups that we're working with in different parts of the world. Yeah. But for the public sessions, people have come from 6 continents.
Yeah. And so what's next with your project? Where are you going with this? What is your goal with this?
Yeah. We have a lot of things on the horizon where we're hoping to do what we're calling multilarity pop-ups, where they would just happen in common area or, town, like different cities and towns. We're going to do one in the Boston Commons pretty soon and just have some conversations in real time with lots of people so that we're getting more and more people showing up to the conversation. So we're actually writing a book right now about the multilarity thinking process. The pop-ups we hope to turn into a show. We work with people from, education communities to corporate to government entities. And so our goal really is, our tagline and our vision for the company is that we may grow. And as individuals in communities, globally, that we can grow together and understand each other more. So that's where we're going.
And I love that. That is a good thing to want to do. How did AI come into it? I know that we're going back to it, but I should have asked you that how did AI come in? How did you how did that come about?
Because this was actually something that I was talking with colleagues about. How could we create this kind of container? And I had this vision that this was, I have to think of the actual date now, 2024. So this was around 2015, 16, that election. And, really feeling like, gosh, we don't know how to talk to each other, and we don't show up in ways that is helpful, and we're not seeing other perspectives that exist. But I was also leading a large American international school at the time. And, we were feeling the tension too of people being divided. And so I was talking with some colleagues and saying, yeah, this is my idea. Like, I think that this could really help advance conversations where we're divided. And my colleague said, yeah, it sounds amazing, but the technology doesn't exist. A couple of years ago, I had an old colleague and friend. We were connected on social media, and he posted about using artificial intelligence. He's a software developer, and using artificial intelligence to make different visual representation. And it kind of, in the moment, I was like, oh my gosh, the technology exists. And so I reached out to him. We had one conversation and we were off and running with this, and, kind of going, okay, it's time, like, dig in, make some proprietary software that does exactly what the vision was. And so, since then, AI continues to take off, but people are so fearful that it's going to be replacing them, that it takes the human out of it. And so we're a tech company and a software company, but we are a human company. I mean, our goal is not that it's over or replacing, but that helps us visualize what the human is saying. It helps the human grow. And I think that's where AI is going to be more and more headed, is how are we using it to better humanity? Because we're, in charge of how we use it, and so there's a real opportunity there for us to say, you know what, this is a technology that exists for us. So let's use it to be better human.
That would be that. And I wish everybody thought like you, but we start thinking, well, at least you start thinking Terminator or 1984, and that's what's going to happen with AI. It's easy to misunderstand. And then when it's such an unknown, it's such a big unknown. Like, if you've ever gone on Chat AI and seen what it could do, it blows your mind how this thing could just do what it does. And then how the software for editing my programs. I mean, this other podcaster told me, hey, try this. And I try. It's like, wow, this thing is amazing. And it's all through AI. And I mean, the dang thing can even make my voice.
Right.
I don't know what I was excited about it or scared.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to think about that. But
Yeah.
do you envision this, the process on Multilarity? Do you envision this in one day in an educational setting?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And we're actually already working in educational settings, because it's, I mean, when we first started, people were like, oh my gosh, this needs to be in schools, but we're also working with educational leaders and, to say, because for us, it's about the dialogue. It's the future of dialogue, not just the future of ed tech, which is also my background, is educational technology. And so I've seen it change over the last several decades. It's the same kind of cycle of storytelling about it too, right? And so for us, it's about how are we using it in real time to represent our dialogue, to really understand it, to seek those patterns, to identify where we're at odds with each other, where we're in common with each other, help us have deeper insights about how we can move forward as a school, as an organization, as a country.
Oh, wow. That'd be beautiful. Now, when you're doing these discussions or talking about putting an educational setting, do you have to bring it down and not figure out how to bring it down a notch a little bit and kind of go to the level where they're at?
I mean, it's super accessible because, anybody can give their response to how they feel about a particular topic, So it's either, like, right now we're working with a series of schools around the issues that are challenging schools right now, and they're coming to it from very different perspectives because the people in their community and the different perspectives that exist in their community about whatever it is. I mean, you could probably pick any of the things out of the air that are challenging schools right now.
So, like, bullying has been a major issue in schools, and it's an issue here. How has the Multilarity Project been dealing with that?
And one example is really at who are we as a community and understanding really the topic in schools that addresses it is belonging. When we break that down, then they can have more insightful conversations about some of the very specific things like bullying.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I love what you're doing. If you guys want to know more about what the doc is doing, you can go over to the Multilarity Project here it is, the website. And, the doc's been busy. She's been in different places and she's talking about this. Highly recommend the TED Talk ones. I didn't even know about this TED Talk stuff. I love what you're doing. And I'm so grateful that somebody is trying to figure out a way that we can not just elevate the conversation, but just elevate ourselves to get to that.
Right.
Elevate ourselves. Because right now, there has to be some way that we can communicate without the hyperbole, without the ugly. I mean, we got to get away from that. So
Yeah, you nailed that. You hit that perfectly.
So thank you so much for coming on. Can you stick around quick?
Absolutely. Thanks so much
Thank
for
you.
having me.
All right.
Fantastic.